Denny Ayalon, thank you very much for joining us here on UpFront. Welcome. Let's just start here. On Tuesday, Israel resumed its heavy bombing of the Gaza Strip in total violation of the ceasefire that was agreed upon in January. But then we have also recorded so far 700 people have died, 200 of them children, since Tuesday. Something else then happened. The Defense Minister Israel Katz actually threatened the residents of Gaza, saying that the heavy bombing was but a first step. He actually says that they would pay the price with utter destruction and devastation. A direct quote, by the way, if they don't expel Hamas. I mean, this is openly genocidal language. At this point, it looks as if Israeli leaders don't care about international law.
Well, really, no, I don't think so. I think that Israel has been trying to really not only abide by international law, but also try to be as compassionate as possible. First of all, to our own people. We have to remember how it all started. The carnage was unfortunately, on our side. You know, when Hamas perpetrated its brutal attack, savage attack, killing babies and mothers and fathers and all that. Now, about the breaking the ceasefire, basically it was Hamas who started that by breaking the ceasefire on a daily basis. They rearmed, they regrouped, they drafted more terrorists to their fold.
Okay, just hold on. You're saying that it's Hamas that violated the ceasefire. It was actually your government that refused to negotiate the second phase of the ceasefire agreement, which should have led to the total release of hostages. And we also know that Israel has also cut off electricity. It has blocked the supply of health needs and all sorts of humanitarian aid. That is in violation of the ceasefire agreement. And also, when you talk about Israel being compassionate, we have over 48,577 people dead, mainly women and children. 13,000 of them are children. That doesn't sound like a compassionate response.
Well, when you put it this way, really this may sound really bad, but we have to remember these numbers that you quote are numbers that were issued by Hamas. And there's nothing you can really, believe in what Hamas say. Yes, there were a lot of casualties there, but I can tell you that most of them, that is at least 75%, were terrorists holding guns. And this is something which is extraordinary, because you see, in all the fighting against terrorism.
Okay, hold on. Let's just talk about the numbers. We have often heard Israeli representatives saying that these numbers were supplied by Hamas. But we do have independent studies by none other than the Johns Hopkins University. There are NGOs that have told us repeatedly that these numbers actually ultimately correspond with Hamas numbers at the end of similar conflicts.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying that the numbers may not be true, but I want to say that who were in these numbers. I say most of them were terrorists, unlike the operations of the United States or the United Kingdom or any other country, whether it was in Iraq or in Afghanistan. When you look at the proportion of, let's say, casualties of civilians to terrorists, it's almost 10 to 1. So we are trying to do our best, but we have to remember it, and this is the most important thing. How did it all start? Not only with Hamas targeting our own civilians, but they embed themselves inside their own civilians, and they use their own civilians as human shields.
You've not actually provided, Israel has not actually provided evidence that Hamas uses civilians as human shields. We know that Israel has bombed schools, hospitals, and has hurt civilians. But I do want to go back to the language of the defense minister, because it is important, Danny. This is a defense minister basically wagging the finger at civilians and actually threatening punitive attacks in order to enforce a political outcome, that they will face destruction, they will face, I quote, utter destruction and devastation unless they expel Hamas. It is genocidal language. Can you concede that point at least?
Well, first of all, I would say that you were right, that there were hospitals and there were schools that were attacked. But why were they attacked? Because they were headquarters of Hamas. They put their rockets there and their terrorists there. So this is one thing, just to set the record straight. But on the language of the Minister of Defense, I would say there is some frustration there, because it is Hamas who is not only holding in human conditions the hostages, but also they refuse to bring them back. They refuse to actually agree to the American
The second phase of the ceasefire would have ensured that. But I just want to say that, Israel has provided no evidence that Hamas is using civilians as a human shield, and you have not allowed independent verification of that particular point. But even if that is the case, Israel still has obligations under international law. It does not mean that Israel is absolved of its responsibility to maintain international law.
Yeah, Israel will not shirk its obligations under international law. Absolutely not. But I think there is one quick answer to everything. If Hamas, demilitarize, put up its arms and bring back the hostages and allow a new and reformed government in Gaza, which will not be backed or will not be a nature of terrorists, everything will be solved. This is what has to be understood. It all stems from the one reason that when Israel left Gaza altogether, so there's not even an issue of quote-unquote occupation. We left to the last inch back in 2005. 2007, Hamas perpetrated...
Let's talk about now, because the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli Minister of Defense, the former Minister Yoav Gallant. The incitement to genocide is also punishable by international law. Let's just talk about you for a moment. In a recent interview on Israeli media, you argued for moving the Gazan people to Sinai. You said, I quote, because of the war situation in Syria, 6 million Syrians left Syria. So here in Gaza, we're talking about 2 million. Now, this is essentially advocating for ethnic cleansing or forced removals in violation of international law as well. Do you worry that you yourself may face legal consequences because of your words in future?
No, not really, because I don't think that anyone takes seriously this international court. It has shown a lot of cynicism, hypocrisy, as you mentioned. Nothing was dealt with the real issues of refugees in Syria or in Sudan or many other places.
But that's not relevant. That's not relevant to Israel's obligations. And it's not just the International Criminal Court, the UN. We've got the UN Convention on Genocide. And by those descriptions, Israel has a case to answer. They can't all be wrong.
Well, really, I'm sure you've heard the American administration, even up all the way to President Trump, that they are actually going to sanction all those justices of the criminal court because of their atrocious and outrageous decisions, trying to ostracize Israel, trying to defame it.
Well, I think there are various conventions and laws that apply here. The Rome Statute defining the forcible transfer of a population as a crime against humanity. But let's just move on and deal with something else. We do know that in a press conference with the Prime Minister of Israel, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, talked about owning Gaza, basically flattening it, redeveloping it and creating some sort of Riviera of the Middle East. Now, for that to happen, 2 million people would have to be forcibly removed. Is that Israel's end goal here?
Well, I think that the president had a wonderful and great idea that shows how visionary he is. And by the way, this could have been done already. As I mentioned, I know that you want to dwell on what's happening now, but what is happening now is also based on what happened 20 years ago when we left Gaza. The idea was to let the Palestinians rebuild Gaza. And the idea was, I remember all of us talked about Singapore, that the Gazans can make Gaza a Singapore. But what did they do instead? Instead of actually building a infrastructure, industry, tourism, everything else, all they built was tunnels.
But do you recognize that the displacement of 2 million Palestinians is a crime against humanity? And you talk about Palestinians as though they are commodities, that they have no agency, they have no hopes and aspirations. And you're saying that it is the plan of the US President Donald Trump, but it was supported by Prime Minister Netanyahu, saying that it was a bold, visionary move or something to that effect. So I'm saying that you are advocating for a decision made by Israel in the United States without Palestinians, without the people of Gaza deciding what they want to do with themselves. We know that the Arab nations in that area have also rejected this particular plan. Why are you not listening?
We're listening very well. I hope that people would also listen to us. And unfortunately, this is what we see in international UN forums, that they listen only to the one side. But I'll tell you, the fact, you're right, the fact that Palestinians go back to their homes is because they have no other choice. There's no other way they can leave. And the Egyptians seal their borders, and that's the only way they can move. So something has to be worked out, maybe with an international conference, and whoever wants to leave can leave. Otherwise, we will not forcibly move anyone. And I very much relate really to
But they will continue to be bombed, right? If they don't want to move, they will continue to be bombed on the territory, as is happening as I'm speaking to you.
No, if the bombing continues, it's not against the people of Gaza. It's against Hamas terrorists, and it's not because they don't want to move out of Gaza. It's because they still illegally keep our hostages.
But hold on, that's not what the Israeli Defense Minister said. The Israeli Defense Minister, and you refuse to address this matter, the genocidal language in his threats and his warnings, he's not talking to Hamas. He is basically saying to the civilians, to the population, you will pay the price. He wants a political outcome, the expulsion of Hamas, but he's saying, we're going to come after you if you don't do that. That is a message to the civilians.
Well, I hope that the civilians in Gaza would have been able to live their lives as they will, and they cannot do it under this terrorism of Hamas, under the terrorism actually of Iran, who's supporting and supplying all these arms to Hamas. Now, I can tell you here, really, that I am not part of the government and I do not represent the government. This is why I don't want to, I'm not the spokesman of the Minister of Defense, but I'm speaking now.
But do you disagree with him? Do you disagree with what the Israeli government is saying it will do?
I'm not necessarily disagree. I'm saying that I'm speaking now just as a grassroots, as an authentic Israeli. Israelis are actually fed up by the terrorism of the Palestinians. I hope that there will be a Palestinian government, a new one, which will not be part of any terror, which will not associate itself with the terrorism, the terrorists of the Ayatollahs in Tehran, and would sit with us on the negotiation table. And I'm sure we can reach an agreement which we all deserve. All of us deserve peace and security. Palestinians, Israelis, all the people in the Middle East.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much. Denny Ayalon, thank you for talking to us on UpFront.
Thank you very much.